Officer Derek Walsh had been with the Portland Police Bureau for 6 years when he kicked down the door of a registered nurse's home at 9:38 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. He was 31 years old, experienced enough to understand the consequences of entering a private residence without a warrant, but apparently convinced that his authority superseded constitutional protections against unreasonable search and seizure. One spring morning in northeast Portland, he received a dispatch about a possible break-in at 2847 Oakmont Drive and made assumptions that would haunt him for the rest of his life. What Walsh did next, forcing entry without verification, ignoring the homeowner's verbal identification, and drawing his weapon on a woman in her own bedroom, would cost him his career, cost the city $575,000, and expose a department that had ignored 7 previous complaints about his aggressive approach to calls in predominantly Asian neighborhoods. A Korean-American woman in her early 30s, Sarah Chen, was asleep in her bed at 9:30 a.m. after completing a 12-hour night shift at Providence Portland Medical Center. Her scrubs were folded on a chair. Her nursing credentials sat on the dresser. No crime, no break-in, no threat, just an emergency room nurse sleeping in her own home after saving lives all night. But Officer Walsh saw a dispatch report that said the homeowner was Michael Chen, saw an Asian woman through the window, and couldn't process that she might actually belong there. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. 2847 Oakmont Drive sits on a tree-lined street in the Grant Park neighborhood of northeast Portland. It's the kind of street where young families buy their first homes, renovated 1920s bungalows with front porches and well-maintained lawns. The Chen family had lived there for 4 years, the only Asian family on a block of predominantly white homeowners. Their house was a modest single-story with pale blue siding, white trim, and a small front porch with 2 wicker chairs. A cherry tree bloomed in the front yard. A Honda Civic sat in the driveway next to Michael Chen's Toyota truck. It was 9:35 a.m. on a Wednesday in April. Spring sunshine filtered through the trees. Birds sang. A lawnmower hummed 3 houses down. The neighborhood was quiet, settled into mid-morning calm after the morning commute. Most people were at work. A few retirees tended gardens. Children wouldn't be home from school for hours. The kind of morning where nothing dramatic typically happens. The Chens had installed a Ring doorbell camera 6 months earlier after a package theft. The camera had a clear view of the front porch, the walkway, and part of the driveway. It recorded continuously, uploading footage to the cloud. Sarah Chen had installed it herself, syncing it to her phone so she could check on deliveries while at work. She never imagined it would document what was about to happen. Sarah Chen had been a registered nurse at Providence Portland Medical Center for 9 years. 9 years of 12-hour shifts in the emergency department, treating gunshot wounds, overdoses, heart attacks, car accident victims, and every other crisis that arrived through those automatic doors. She'd intubated patients in respiratory failure, performed CPR on cardiac arrest victims, and held the hands of people taking their last breaths. She'd worked COVID wards during the worst months of the pandemic, wearing the same N95 mask for entire shifts because supplies ran low, watching patients die alone because families couldn't visit. She'd saved lives most people couldn't imagine losing. Her colleagues called her unflappable. Her patients called her the nurse who made everything less scary. Sarah had graduated from Oregon Health and Science University's nursing program at 23, then completed her bachelor's degree while working full-time. She'd earned her trauma certification, her advanced cardiac life support certification, and her pediatric advanced life support certification. She'd been nominated twice for the hospital's Excellence in Nursing Award. She'd trained dozens of new nurses over the years, teaching them how to stay calm when everything around them was chaos. At 32 years old, Sarah Chen was exactly where she'd worked to be. She and her husband Michael, a software engineer at Intel, had bought the house on Oakmont Drive 4 years earlier. They'd renovated the kitchen, refinished the hardwood floors, and painted every room. They'd planted the cherry tree in the front yard. They'd made it home. They'd joined the neighborhood association, attended block parties, and waved to neighbors. That Wednesday, Sarah had worked the night shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. It had been a brutal night in the ER. 2 car accident victims, 1 shooting, 3 overdoses, and a steady stream of chest pain, abdominal pain, and respiratory distress. She'd barely sat down for 12 hours. At 7:15 a.m., she'd clocked out, exhausted, changed out of her scrubs, and driven the 20 minutes home. Michael had already left for work. The house was quiet. She'd arrived home at 7:40 a.m., parked in the driveway, grabbed her bag, and walked inside. She'd eaten a bowl of cereal, taken a shower, and crawled into bed by 8:15 a.m. Her phone was on silent. Her blackout curtains blocked the morning sun. She'd fallen asleep within minutes. She wore pajama pants and an old nursing school t-shirt. Her hospital ID badge sat on the dresser next to her car keys. Her nursing license was in her wallet. Her work scrubs were folded on the chair. She looked like what she was, a nurse sleeping after a night shift. She'd done nothing wrong. She'd violated no law. She was in her own home, in her own bed, sleeping. But to someone looking at a dispatch report that listed the homeowner as Michael Chen, Sarah Chen's presence in that house was going to become a problem. Derek Walsh was 31 years old. He'd been a patrol officer with the Portland Police Bureau for 6 years, assigned to the Northeast Precinct for the last 4. He was aggressive, results-oriented, and convinced that his instincts about suspicious situations were always correct. His supervisors described him as proactive, but sometimes lacking in judgment when it came to de-escalation and constitutional boundaries. In 6 years, Derek Walsh had compiled a record that should have raised immediate concerns. 7 complaints. 7. 5 of them involved allegations that he'd overreacted to calls in neighborhoods with significant Asian populations. A Vietnamese family in the Jade District reported that Walsh had demanded identification from everyone at a family barbecue in their own backyard after a neighbor called about loud music. A Chinese restaurant owner complained that Walsh had accused her of operating without a license despite seeing her permits displayed on the wall. A Korean student at Portland State University reported that Walsh had stopped and searched him 3 times in 2 months, each time insisting he matched the description of a suspect. An elderly Filipino man reported that Walsh had detained him for 45 minutes outside his own home, refusing to believe he lived there despite showing his driver's license with the matching address. All 5 complaints mentioned the same pattern: Walsh assuming Asian people didn't belong where they were, demanding proof of legitimacy, and refusing to accept that proof when presented. 3 complaints had been sustained, resulting in written reprimands and diversity training that Walsh attended but apparently never internalized. 2 complaints were closed with insufficient evidence. 2 more complaints involved excessive force during arrests that supervisors deemed within policy but borderline. The pattern was clear. The documentation was extensive, but somehow Derek Walsh remained on patrol, responding to calls, carrying a gun and a badge that gave him the authority to enter homes and make arrests. That Wednesday morning at 9:22 a.m., Walsh received a dispatch. Possible 459 in progress, 2847 Oakmont Drive. Caller reports seeing an unknown Asian female entering the residence. Homeowner is listed as Michael Chen. Caller believes it may be a break-in. The caller was Barbara Hendricks, a 67-year-old retiree who lived 2 doors down. She'd seen an Asian woman pull into the driveway at 7:40 a.m., walk to the front door, and enter the house. She knew Michael Chen, the husband, left for work every morning around 7 a.m. She'd never seen this woman before. In her mind, something didn't add up. She called the police. Walsh responded immediately. In his mind, the call was straightforward. Unknown person entering a house when the homeowner wasn't home. Possible burglary. He'd handle it. He arrived at 9:35 a.m., parking his patrol car in front of the house. He scanned the scene. Quiet street, modest house. Honda Civic in the driveway that he didn't recognize. He walked up the front steps, his hand resting on his service weapon. His body camera was recording. The Ring doorbell camera was recording. Everything that happened next would be documented. He pressed the doorbell. Then he pounded on the door with his fist. Sarah Chen was deep in sleep when the pounding started. Her brain registered the noise slowly, pulling her from exhausted unconsciousness. She opened her eyes, disoriented. The room was dark. The blackout curtains blocked the sun. She had no idea what time it was. The pounding came again, harder this time. Then a voice, loud and aggressive. "Open up! Police!" Sarah's heart jumped. She sat up in bed, trying to orient herself. Police? Why were police at her door? She grabbed her phone from the nightstand. 9:36 a.m. She'd been asleep for about an hour. She got out of bed, walked to the bedroom doorway, and called toward the front of the house. "What? I'm sleeping. Ma'am, open this door now." Sarah's confusion mixed with irritation. She walked toward the front door, unlocking her phone to check the Ring camera app. The video feed showed a police officer on her porch, one hand on his gun. "I'm not opening my door. I just got home from work. What's this about? We received a call about a break-in at this address. Open up, or I'm coming in." Sarah's irritation turned to alarm. A break-in? At her own house? A break-in? "I live here. There's no break-in. Check your address. I have the right address. This is 2847 Oakmont Drive. That's my house. I'm the homeowner. You have the wrong information. The homeowner is listed as Michael Chen. You're not Michael Chen." And there it was. Sarah understood immediately. Someone had seen an Asian woman enter a house and assumed she was breaking in. Someone had called the police, and now this officer was at her, demanding entry, because he couldn't imagine that she might actually live here. "Michael Chen is my husband. We own this house together. I'm Sarah Chen. My name is on the deed. I'm inside my own home." "Sure you are. I'm coming in." Sarah heard something that made her blood run cold. The sound of the officer's boot hitting the door. She backed away from the entrance, her phone still in her hand. "You can't come in without a warrant. I'm telling you, I live here. I'm the homeowner. There is no break-in." The door shook as Walsh kicked it again. The deadbolt held, but the door frame cracked. This is where assumption becomes violation. This is where an officer's refusal to believe a woman's clear statement of ownership transforms into an illegal entry. Derek Walsh had a homeowner on the other side of the door, verbally identifying herself, explaining her right to be there, citing her constitutional protections. But Walsh had already decided she was lying. The dispatch said Michael Chen. The woman speaking said Sarah Chen. In Walsh's mind, that meant she was a burglar trying to avoid arrest. Every word she said after that, reasonable, clear, constitutional, was filtered through his initial assumption. The third kick splintered the doorframe. The door burst open. Walsh entered with his weapon drawn, scanning the interior. The living room was neat, furnished, lived in. Family photos on the walls. A wedding photo of Michael and Sarah Chen on the mantel. Shoes by the door. Mail on the side table addressed to Sarah Chen and Michael Chen. Sarah stood in the hallway between the living room and bedroom, wearing pajamas, her phone in her hand, shaking with fear and rage. "Put your hands up. Do it now. I live here. This is my house. You just broke down my door. Hands up, or I will shoot you." Sarah raised her hands, her phone still clutched in her right hand. She could see Walsh's body camera, the red light indicating it was recording. "Good. Let it record. Everything. I am Sarah Chen. I am a registered nurse at Providence Portland Medical Center. I just finished a 12-hour night shift. I came home at 7:40 this morning and went to sleep. This is my house. My name is on the mortgage. My ID is on the dresser in that bedroom. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights. Turn around, hands behind your back. No, I'm not under arrest. I've committed no crime. I'm standing in my own home." Walsh moved toward her, holstering his weapon and pulling out handcuffs. "Turn around now." Sarah had been a nurse long enough to recognize danger. She'd dealt with violent patients, with people high on meth who could kill her with their bare hands. She'd learned when to stand her ground and when to comply for her own safety. She turned around, fury and humiliation burning through her. "I'm complying under protest. I am the homeowner. Everyone watching this video will see that I told you repeatedly I live here. You broke into my home. You're violating the law." Walsh grabbed her wrists roughly, snapping handcuffs on. They were tight. Sarah felt the metal bite into her skin. Outside, the commotion had attracted attention. Two neighbors stood on their lawns, watching. One had her phone out, recording. The Ring doorbell camera had captured everything. Walsh kicking down the door, entering with his weapon drawn, the audio of Sarah identifying herself. Walsh walked Sarah outside, still in her pajamas, still handcuffed, barefoot. The concrete was rough under her feet. The morning sun was blinding after the dark bedroom. She saw Barbara Hendricks standing on her porch 2 houses down, hand over her mouth. "There's the woman who called you. Ask her if she's ever met me. Ask her if she knows Michael Chen is married." Walsh ignored her, guiding her toward the patrol car. "I want your badge number. I want your supervisor's name. I want to know who authorized you to break into a private residence without a warrant. I want to see your probable cause for this arrest. You'll get all that at the station." The neighbor with the phone called out. "She's telling the truth. She lives there. I've seen her for years." Walsh opened the back door of the patrol car. "Get in." Sarah ducked into the back seat, still handcuffed, still barefoot, still wearing pajamas. The door closed. She looked back at her house, with the front door hanging open, the frame splintered, everything she owned visible to the street. This is where bias becomes burglary. Officer Walsh had received a call about a possible break-in. When he arrived, he saw an Asian woman who didn't match the name on the property records. Instead of verifying her identity, instead of checking the deed, instead of looking at the family photos visible through the open door, he decided she was a liar. And when she cited her constitutional rights, he kicked down her door and arrested her in her own home. Do you think officers should face criminal charges for breaking into homes without warrants when the homeowner verbally identifies themselves? Drop your answer below. Sergeant Maria Torres arrived at the scene within 18 minutes. She was a 19-year veteran of the Portland Police Bureau who'd worked her way up from patrol, who'd seen plenty of officer mistakes, and who'd recommended discipline more than once when policies were violated. She'd reviewed Derek Walsh's file before. She knew about the complaints. She knew about the pattern. She pulled up behind Walsh's patrol car and immediately saw the problem. A splintered door frame, a front door hanging open, a woman in pajamas and handcuffs in the back seat. She approached Walsh, who was standing by his car, filling out paperwork. "Walsh, what's the situation?" "Possible burglary. I responded to a call about an unknown female entering the residence. Homeowner is listed as Michael Chen. Subject claimed to be Sarah Chen, but couldn't provide identification." Torres looked at the woman in the back seat, then back at the house. She walked to the patrol car and opened the door. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Torres. Can you tell me what happened?" Sarah's voice was controlled, but her hands were shaking. "I'm Sarah Chen. I'm a registered nurse. I worked the night shift at Providence Portland and came home this morning at 7:40 to sleep. I own this house with my husband Michael Chen. Our names are both on the deed. That officer," she nodded toward Walsh, "kicked down my door, drew his weapon on me, and arrested me in my own bedroom. My ID is inside on the dresser. My hospital badge is right next to it. Family photos are on the walls. Mail with my name is on the table. He never asked to see any of it. He just decided I was lying and broke down my door." Torres walked to the open front door and looked inside. She saw immediately what Walsh should have seen. The wedding photo on the mantel, showing Michael Chen and Sarah Chen. The mail on the side table addressed to both of them. The hospital ID, badge visible on the dresser through the open bedroom door. She walked back to Walsh. "Did you look at anything inside that house before you made the arrest?" She refused to open the door. The call said possible burglary. "Did you ask to see identification?" She said it was inside. "Did you verify the property records to see if Sarah Chen's name appears on the deed?" Walsh's face went pale. He hadn't. Torres pulled out her phone and called into dispatch. "This is Sergeant Torres. I need property records for 2847 Oakmont Drive. Who's listed on the deed?" The response came back within 90 seconds. Michael Chen and Sarah Chen. Joint ownership. Both names on the deed since 2019. Torres hung up and turned to Walsh, her expression barely containing fury. "You arrested a homeowner in her own house. You kicked down her door without a warrant. You drew your weapon on a woman who was sleeping in her own bed. And you did it without verifying a single piece of information. The call said, I don't care what the call said. You verify before you violate someone's constitutional rights. That's basic procedure. Give me your badge and your weapon. You're on administrative leave, effective immediately. Walsh pulled his badge and gun from his belt, his hands shaking. For the first time, he seemed to understand what he'd done. Torres walked back to the patrol car and uncuffed Sarah Chen. Ma'am, I am deeply sorry. This should never have happened. Your door will be repaired at city expense. I'm going to need your statement, and I'm recommending you contact an attorney. This was a serious violation of your rights. Sarah rubbed her wrists. Red marks circled both of them where the cuffs had been too tight. I'm contacting an attorney today. This wasn't a mistake. This was racial profiling. Someone saw an Asian woman enter a house and assumed I didn't belong there. That officer saw my name, didn't match his assumption, and decided I was a criminal. I told him repeatedly I was the homeowner. I cited my Fourth Amendment rights. He kicked down my door anyway. This is exactly why people don't trust police. Torres nodded. I understand. And I want you to know that this will be investigated fully. Officer Walsh's actions violated department policy and constitutional law. He will face consequences. What about Barbara Hendricks, the neighbor who called? Torres looked toward the Hendricks house. I'll be speaking with her next. Should neighbors who call 911 on homeowners based solely on race face civil liability for false reports? Let me know what you think. Within 4 hours, the Ring doorbell footage had exploded across social media. The video showed everything. Walsh pounding on the door, Sarah identifying herself through the door, Walsh kicking the door down, the sound of Sarah's voice explaining she was the homeowner. Then Walsh's body camera footage leaked, released by someone in the department who was disgusted by what they'd seen, showing Walsh drawing his weapon on Sarah in her pajamas, handcuffing her despite her clear statements of ownership. Nurse arrested in her own home after working 12-hour shift. Portland officer kicks down door, arrests homeowner for being Asian. Ring camera captures illegal entry by police, costs officer his job. The outrage was immediate and intense. The Oregon Nurses Association issued a statement condemning the arrest. Asian American advocacy organizations called for criminal charges against Walsh. Civil rights groups demanded an investigation into the Portland Police Bureau's handling of Walsh's prior complaints. Derek Walsh's life imploded within 48 hours. He was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The union declined to fight the suspension after reviewing the evidence. Walsh's name trended on Twitter for 3 days. He issued a brief statement through his attorney. I responded to a call in good faith. I regret that the situation escalated. No apology, no acknowledgement of the constitutional violations. No recognition that he'd terrorized an innocent woman in her own home. Barbara Hendricks, the neighbor who'd called 911, gave a tearful interview to local news. I didn't know Sarah lived there. I'd never met her. I only knew Michael. I thought I was helping. I'm so sorry. She was not charged with filing a false report, though Sarah Chen's attorneys would later name her in the civil lawsuit. Sarah Chen contacted civil rights attorney Marcus Webb within 24 hours. Webb had handled high-profile police misconduct cases across Oregon. He reviewed the evidence, the ring footage, the body camera video, the dispatch audio, the property records, and reached an immediate conclusion. This is one of the most clear-cut Fourth Amendment violations I've ever seen. An officer broke into a home without a warrant, without probable cause, and arrested the homeowner who had identified herself multiple times. This is textbook illegal search and seizure. The lawsuit named Officer Derek Walsh for unlawful arrest, excessive force, and violation of constitutional rights. It named Sergeant Maria Torres for supervisory failure. Why was Walsh still on patrol after 7 complaints? It named the Portland Police Bureau for failure to train and supervise, for ignoring a clear pattern of discriminatory policing, and for creating a culture where constitutional violations were tolerated. The claims were extensive. Unlawful entry and search without a warrant or exigent circumstances. False arrest and imprisonment without probable cause. violation of Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable search and seizure, violation of 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause, racial profiling, excessive use of force, kicking down door, drawing weapon, tight handcuffs, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent hiring, retention, and supervision of Officer Walsh despite documented pattern of complaints, failure to implement adequate training on constitutional policing, and implicit bias. The complaint included Walsh's complete disciplinary record: 7 complaints over 6 years, 5 involving racial bias against Asian residents, 3 sustained, 4 closed without meaningful investigation. Every complaint documented, every training completion logged, every supervisor evaluation noting concerns about judgment, a pattern the department had acknowledged but never acted upon decisively. The city's attorneys reviewed the evidence and reached the same conclusion every lawyer who looked at the case reached: indefensible. The ring camera footage showed a homeowner clearly identifying herself. The body camera showed Walsh ignoring that identification. The property records proved Sarah Chen's ownership. The photos inside the house proved her residence. There was no probable cause for entry. There was no exigent circumstance. There was no warrant. There was only an officer who saw an Asian woman and decided she didn't belong. The city settled 9 months later, $575,000 paid to Sarah Chen. The settlement agreement included additional terms. The Portland Police Bureau would implement mandatory warrant verification training, establish a 3-complaint threshold for mandatory desk duty pending investigation, and create an independent review board for all use of force incidents involving people of color. Derek Walsh was terminated 11 weeks after the incident. The termination letter was final and devastating. Officer Derek Walsh violated the constitutional rights of a citizen by entering her home without a warrant, without probable cause, and without exigent circumstances. He arrested the homeowner despite her repeated verbal identification and clear evidence visible in the residents supporting her claims. This incident represents the culmination of a pattern of behavior documented in 7 prior complaints, all of which involved assumptions about Asian residents' legitimacy in their own neighborhoods. Despite multiple training interventions, Officer Walsh continued to demonstrate judgment failures and bias-driven policing. His employment is terminated immediately and without appeal. Walsh's name was entered into the National Decertification Index, a database that prevents terminated officers from being rehired in other jurisdictions. His law enforcement career ended at 31 years old. He would never carry a badge again. Barbara Hendricks settled with Sarah Chen for an undisclosed amount, paid by her homeowner's insurance. She moved out of the neighborhood 6 months later. Should officers who violate the Fourth Amendment face automatic decertification, regardless of prior record? Drop your answer. Sarah Chen testified before the Portland City Council during a hearing on police reform. Her testimony was powerful and devastating. I'm a registered nurse with 9 years of experience at Providence Portland Medical Center. I've saved lives. I've worked through a pandemic. I've done everything right. I bought a home, I pay my taxes, I serve my community, and I was arrested in my own bed while wearing pajamas after working a 12-hour night shift. She paused, her voice steady, but her hands gripping the podium. I told Officer Walsh I was the homeowner. I told him my name. I told him I had identification inside. I cited my Fourth Amendment rights. None of it mattered. He kicked down my door. He pointed a gun at me. He handcuffed me in front of my neighbors and arrested me for sleeping in my own house. Another pause. Officer Walsh had 7 complaints before me. 7. 5 of them involved the same pattern, assuming Asian people didn't belong where they were. The department knew. His supervisors knew. They documented it. They noted it in evaluations. They sent him to training. But they left him on the street with a gun and a badge and the authority to kick down doors. Her voice strengthened. $575,000 is significant. It's accountability. But it doesn't undo waking up to someone breaking into my home. It doesn't undo the terror of having a gun pointed at me in my own bedroom. It doesn't restore the feeling of safety I had before that morning. It doesn't repair my relationship with my neighbors, some of whom still think I must have done something wrong because police don't just arrest innocent people. She looked directly at the council members. If this can happen to me, a registered nurse with a mortgage and family photos on the walls and a hospital ID on the dresser, what happens to Asian families who don't speak perfect English? What happens to renters who don't have their names on deeds? What happens to people who don't have the resources to hire civil rights attorneys? How many people has Officer Walsh terrorized who never had their day in court? The room was silent. 7 complaints in 6 years. That's not bad luck. That's not misunderstandings. That's a pattern. A pattern your department ignored until it targeted someone with resources to fight back. Should police departments face federal oversight after patterns of racial profiling are documented through multiple sustained complaints? Comment your thoughts. This wasn't just about one morning. This wasn't just about one officer kicking down one door. This was about a department that let Derek Walsh accumulate 7 complaints over 6 years and kept him on patrol. This was about supervisors who noted concerns in evaluations, but never removed him from the street. This was about a system that treated each incident in isolation, never connecting the dots, never recognizing the pattern. 7 complaints over 6 years, 5 involving racial bias against Asian residents, 3 sustained with written reprimands and diversity training, 4 closed without meaningful investigation. Walsh completed every training module. He attended every required session, and nothing changed. Because training without consequences is just paperwork. Complaints without pattern analysis are just filed away. And officers who terrorize communities based on race keep their badges until they kick down the door of someone who can fight back. Derek Walsh's career is over. That's justice. The city paid $575,000? That's accountability. Walsh's name is in the National Decertification Index? That's consequence. But money and terminations don't undo the trauma of being arrested in your own home. They don't restore the dignity of being handcuffed in your pajamas in front of your neighbors. They don't erase the message that even property deeds and mortgage payments and family photos aren't enough proof when an officer has already decided you don't belong. The real question is, what changes now? Do departments finally remove officers after 3 complaints instead of 7? Do supervisors finally recognize that noting concerns in evaluations without taking action is complicity? Do we finally acknowledge that diversity training without accountability is performance art, not policy? Because if we don't fix the systems that kept Derek Walsh on patrol, despite 5 documented incidents of racial profiling, if we don't address the culture that treats constitutional violations as training opportunities instead of fireable offenses, then we're just waiting for the next officer, the next homeowner, the next doorbell camera video. Comment if you believe this should be law. Officers who violate the 4th Amendment by entering homes without warrants face automatic termination and criminal charges, regardless of prior record or years of service. And if you think these stories need to be told, if you believe accountability starts with exposure and change starts with pressure, then hit that subscribe button. We're not stopping. We're going to keep exposing these patterns. We're going to keep demanding that badges don't override the Constitution. We're going to keep fighting for the nurses, the homeowners, the ordinary people who deserve to sleep in their own beds without being terrorized by those sworn to protect them. This isn't just about one officer or one nurse. It's about all of us and the society we choose to accept. It's about whether we believe constitutional rights apply equally or only to people whose names match officers' assumptions. It's about whether 7 complaints mean anything if the 8th one targets someone with a camera and a lawyer. Sarah Chen is safe now. Her door has been repaired. Her settlement has been paid. But she still flinches when someone knocks. She still checks her Ring camera obsessively. She still wonders which of her neighbors thinks she deserved it. And somewhere in Portland, another officer with multiple complaints is still on patrol, still carrying a gun, still making assumptions about who belongs where. That's the pattern we need to break.